Thank you for waiting. We are about to start the last day of this Festival of Ideas here in Sibiu. And now I would like to invite on the scene Mr. Matei Visniec, who is already here, Mr. Joseph Melillo from the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and Mrs. Cristina Modreanu from theater critic and journalist. I'm wishing you a very fruitful conversation, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I hope everybody outside will come when they will hear that we are already talking. I'm very glad to be here with two institutions, basically, because there are two people with very different experiences, and we are going to talk a lot about that, because in preparing a little bit this conversation, we exchanged some emails, and Joe was kind of anxious at some point, and he answered me, please be aware that US has no cultural policy, no Ministry of Cultural Affairs, so the systems are very different. And yes, I am aware of that. I hope our participants know a little bit about that, but we have to come with new ideas, I think, and it's a good opportunity here to have you two with two very different experiences from two systems, the European one and the American one, and to try to pick up the best things in the two systems, and why not maybe brainstorm about it until we find a better system with a mixture of the things that are very good in the US and the things that are very good in Europe. And one of these, well, the lack of policies in culture, it's a policy in a way, right? So it's something that the state designed in a very different way than in Europe, where the state is subsidizing culture. It's very different in US, but it's different in a very deep and interesting model, because you have a frame of taxation which encourages a lot corporate giving and private giving, which is not the case in US. So, and this basic fact influence a lot the way culture is funding in US. As opposed to Europe, where artists and cultural institutions are always waiting for the state to subsidize them, to help them, to design a system where artists are kind of protected and privileged, which is not the case in US. So if I would ask you, you both, the same question: which are the best things in the system, in the cultural policies in US as opposed to Europe, as you see them? Things that can be, I don't know, maintained in a future system, in a future better system.
Okay, so the answer specifically is, in the United States, the lack of a national cultural policy and the lack of a Ministry of Culture means that art and culture, and anyone who wanted to participate in art and culture as a professional, you have to find a methodology to survive. So that is where the fundamental issue is, that everything that you understand about the United States of America represents a history of men and women acting as an individual or acting as an institution to survive. And it's a kind of problem solving, that cultural institutions that were founded long before I was born, that they found the way to establish themselves, and in the course of their survival, the US government understood that there had to be some methodology that contributed to their survival. So that's where the taxation process surfaced, that if you're a particular organization, which we call a non-commercial, not-for-profit organization, that an individual citizen in the United States can write a check, make the financial contribution, and receive a tax credit. And most organizations throughout the United States completely rely on private individuals to make those contributions. It's just what the system is. And fundamentally, the system, because it's separate from the government, allows for a lot of freedom to artistically be whoever you want to be. But that means you have to find the individuals to be able to make the financial contribution to how you define yourself.
To help you being free, in a way. But there is something that we don't talk so much in Europe about, which is the National Endowment for the Arts, which is helping some of the institutions, some of the big institutions in US. And of course, it's sometimes a big dispute around this kind of helping. Can we talk about BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music? How much is coming in your funding from the state or from the National Endowment of the Arts or from the private donating and corporate donating?
Yes, well, my organization, which is called the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and the acronym is BAM, receives from the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the agency of the federal government that awards money only to organizations. The National Endowment for the Arts cannot give money to an individual. It can only give money to organizations. So BAM's operating budget is approximately 53 million US dollars, and the National Endowment for the Arts grant is 50,000 US dollars. And of the 53, approximately $30 million comes from private contributions.
Is this affecting in any way your programming? How is funding in general affecting your programming?
It doesn't. It only relates to how much money can be allocated to a programming budget. But I've been at BAM since 1983, and so there is no financial pressure for me to program or to make an artistic decision at all.
Coming back to the European system, things are very different, and artists and institutions have great expectations from the state. How is this affecting their artistic freedom, and what is wrong about the system? Because lately it seems it doesn't work very well.
Yes, in fact, I will try speaking in French. In English, perhaps some things I will say it in Romanian. When I discovered the French system, because I live in France since '87, I was astonished, coming from Romania in France, and to discover how many possibilities I had there as a playwright. I was really astonished. For example, many companies were looking for place of living author vivant. In Romania, nobody asked me a play as a living author. It was really against the tradition even. But as a living author in France, I had very quickly my plays produced, and then I had these opportunities to write plays commandate.
Yes,
Commissioned.
Exactly. And I wrote for actors, for directors, for companies, And I said when I came in France, it's a paradise for an author, for somebody coming from abroad, coming from the Eastern Europe. It was really the paradise because a lot of public money was invested in the creativity, the young creativity, and so on. Of course, France is a bit special. 10 years ago, I had a very strong experience with some French playwrights and American playwrights. The French Society of Playwrights organized a sort of meeting in Chicago with 10 French, I was francophone, author francophone, but I participated, 10 French or francophone playwrights and 10 American playwrights. And we talked 3 days there, many interesting things, and the last day something very strange happened. We, the European and French playwrights, we took our place to give them to the American friends, and they gave us their place. Because in our mind, the America was a sort of window to the opportunities to be worldwide recognized. And we said how it is important for us to be produced or translated in America. It's like a dream. And they told us, our dream is to escape from the commercial pressure and to be produced and translated in Europe. Because when we are translated and produced in Europe, we feel that we are recognized finally as a true artist. And the European artists want to be recognized in America because it means an opportunity to all the world. And they, I think now, they think that here the true arts is like a sort of recognition. What I'm going to say now is that if God does exist, He likes diversity. It's very nice to have all these models. And it's very nice to have the Romanian models, which is the most special because it's le bordel total. It means no rules, no really true state conviction to give money for the culture, but with many people who had a huge energy and huge ideas and who are able to produce such a festival and many other events in Romania. I will finish with a sort of anecdote, like a joke, a story. 7 years ago, a company from Chicago came here with one of my plays, and they played in Timișoara, in Cluj, in Sibiu. And then we were in the bus back to Bucharest to the airport. They were going to go back. And I asked them, tell me only one thing you liked mostly in Romania. There were some 10 people, actors, and they talked, after a long reflection, they told me that what we liked mostly is to lose time. To lose time in Romania in a festival is something very special. I think we Romanian, we should produce a sort of industry, how to teach the Western people and American people to lose time to become rich. Because we are a huge specialist how to teach others to lose time in the right way. Well, je peux dire, pot să spun și lucruri mai serioase, dar mai târziu.
Some serious stuff, but
it's very interesting how you see as a French now the Romanian system, but the truth is that this kind of festival is very important for us, especially because we are at a crossing point somehow, and there are two different models going on in Romania right now. The American model in a way, and the institutional finance subsidized by the state model. They are going in a parallel, I don't know if you know about that, but there is an independent culture in the arts in Romania, which is functioning exactly like in US, exactly like in New York. They have no financing, almost none, and they have to support themselves, and they have to pay a lot for this kind of freedom that Joe Melillo is talking about. So it's very important to understand the two models, so that we can understand which one is the best, which one is working. And I was asking you about that because there are a lot of protests in France lately, not only in the arts, but in the arts too, because apparently this system of almost totally financing from the state is not working anymore. Can we support that in the future? Is the economy able to support that on a long run? Ca să spun și în românește, deși poate acest sistem să mai funcționeze, e o întrebare cheie, cred, pentru viitor, fiindcă în ultimul timp în Franța au fost foarte multe proteste și sunt în continuare, chiar zilele astea, pentru că statul pare, din punct de vedere economic, incapabil să mai susțină acest tip de finanțare.
Nu poate să funcționeze în continuare acest sistem francez și european, pentru că au fost comise multe abuzuri.
There's a lot of the system, European and national, most likely will not be able to function in the future because there have been there's a lot of injustice and wrongdoings in these activities.
În Franța a fost creat statutul de intermitent de spectacol pentru artiști.
France has created a status of intermittent.
Subsidizing for the artists who are paid from the state even in between projects. If they work enough in a year, they receive money from the state to live on the rest of the year. It's a system that apparently it's kind of broke down right now because it's not working anymore.
Care a funcționat timp de 40 de ani.
Which worked for over 40 years.
Ceea ce înseamnă că un actor sau un artist, dacă lucrează 3 luni, are asigurată asigurarea socială pe un an.
So if an artist works for 3 months, let's say, he has the insurance for the other remaining months of the year.
Ceea ce a stimulat apetitul pentru artă, cultură și creație.
Which helped a lot the appetite for art and culture.
Dar a creat în același timp o inflație.
But also created an inflation of artists.
Și apariția foarte multor grupuri de artiști extrem de modeste.
And the growing number of artists which are slightly modest.
Care mai mult se hrăneau din banii publici decât creau.
Which were parasiting the system.
Yes.
Deci statul providență pentru cultură este într-un moment dificil.
The state that supports culture in this way is in a serious danger, and I presume also culture.
Cum statul providență în general din țările nordice, însă în Franța a existat o inițiativă extraordinară care a funcționat, descentralizarea culturală.
So decentralizing culture or cultural decentralization has been very important in France.
Acest model ar putea funcționa încă în România.
This model could still work in Romania.
În anii 60, statul a spus: vă dăm bani, creați spectacole, creați teatre, creați institut în provincie.
In the 60s, the Romanian said that we'll give you money, create shows, create culture in outside of Bucharest especially.
Astăzi sunt cel puțin 3.000 de actori în România care nu au de lucru.
We have today in Romania at least 3,000 actors that have no jobs.
Dacă statul le spune, vă dăm bani, mergeți să creați un teatru la Fălticeni sau la Bârlad este, la Siret sau știu eu, la Rădăuți, în mod normal, acești actori, unii dintre ei s-ar duce.
So in theory, if the state would give money to these actors to go down and actually build theaters in smaller towns or cities in Romania, most likely many of them or some of them would go.
În același timp, în România, noi ne inspirăm mult din sistemul american pentru că sponsorii sunt prezenți pe șantierul cultural.
We have a lot of corporate inspiration from the US, as a lot of cultural projects are actually sponsored by.
De pildă, acest festival de la Sibiu, nu știu dacă toată lumea știe, el este un festival privat de altfel.
For example, this festival is a private one.
In what way private?
Întrebați-l pe Constantin Chiriac. Este ideea lui, dar cu bani care vin din foarte multe direcții ca sponsorizare.
So money is the sources of funding are very diverse.
The percentage in all cultural institutions and festivals in Romania, the percentage coming from private donors, it's very, very small. It's the other way around. The model that Joe Melillo described here, it's exactly the opposite in Romania. So the smaller percentage is coming from the private donors, and yes, the Sibiu Festival is doing a lot better than the other institutions, but it's less than 20%, I think. So that's a very small percentage in the budget of a big festival. And I wanted to ask you, Matei, so your solution, you think that the state is still a solution when you're talking about this model that the state should give money to the young artists who are not employed anymore to build a theater institution somewhere. This means that you believe that the state is the solution, right?
Într-o țară ca a noastră, care merge încet, statul...
In a country like Romania, which tends to go slowly.
Statul trebuie să asigure accesul la cultură.
The state must ensure free access.
Este datoria statului să asigure numai accesul la cultură al cetățeanului, dar și accesul la diversitate culturală.
It is a state mission to offer access to culture, but also to cultural diversity.
Pentru că dacă așteptăm ca din surse private să se creeze evenimente culturale, ar trebui să mai așteptăm 100 de ani ca într-adevăr România să aibă toată diversitatea culturală de care ar trebui să aibă nevoie o țară normală.
So if we just wait for private money to create culture, it might take 100 years to have
Dar
that.
lucrurile se pot debloca. Oamenii politici înțeleg până la urmă, cu greu, dar înțeleg că, de fapt, cultura este și un vector economic.
Slowly, politicians understand that culture is also an economic vector.
Omul de cultură este cel care trebuie, până la urmă, să explice omului politic o dată, de 2 ori, de 5 ori, de 100 de ori, că până la urmă înțelege.
Persistency. So the culture should, cultural people, let's say, should talk more and more to politicians.
Și anume că 100 de euro, să zicem, investiți în cultură, nu aduc peste 2 săptămâni 150 de euro de profit.
So 100 euro that you put today in culture will definitely not bring 115 in 2 weeks.
Investiția în cultură este o investiție în timp.
Investment in culture is an investment that takes a long time.
Care aduce un profit mental, dar și economic, care nu poate fi cifrat imediat.
Which brings unquantifiable progress instantly.
Și care construiește, de fapt, personalitatea omului. Este dimensiunea educațională a culturii, care nu poate fi cântărită în bani.
And the educational dimension of culture cannot be weighed in money.
I would like to ask Joe Melillo about what do you think about this picture of the state being involved so deeply in the culture? Do you miss the absence of the state?
No, listen, I'm a big admirer of French culture and the French system. You know, how can you argue against a government who allocates 1 billion euros for art and culture for their country? You can't argue against that. And of course, there's always going to be someone who's not part of the system, but those individuals and organizations, and again, you know, that France set up a decentralization process in terms of culture so that it's not just all Parisian arts institutions, that it is distributed throughout the entire country. The maisons de cultures are extraordinary, but you know, again, it does mean a certain kind of reliance on the government for the work that you do, and their system was very different than our system because, you know, they have their parties are radically different than how ours are structured. So we just simply celebrate our difference, you know. And again, the USA has had to rely on everyone's creative imagination and persistence to find solutions to survive in order to do their art.
So persistence is a key word in this conversation.
Absolutely, whether you're in a state-supported structure or the USA structure.
We talked about cultural policies, and slowly we are moving to institution building, which is the second theme of our conversation today. I want to ask you, Joe, about how do you do that at BAM? I was lucky enough to participate in a block party near BAM before the opening of the Fisher, a new building of BAM, the Fisher building, and I saw how you really celebrate diversity in that neighborhood, which is a very diverse one. I wanted to say more about how do you reach your audience? How do you enlarge the audience? Because this is something we still have to learn in Romania, at least, not in Europe, but in Romania, about audience development. That's something that we don't know much about. We just tackle the term, but we are not talking so much about that.
Well, first of all, everyone should know that it's clear by the name, even though we're in New York City, we are in the borough of Brooklyn. So it is acknowledged that Manhattan is perceived as the center of art and culture, and that you actually have to travel. If you are a visitor visiting Manhattan, you have to travel to come to Brooklyn. So our institution, based in Brooklyn, services both Brooklyn and Manhattan. Our responsibility has been over time is to acknowledge also that the Brooklyn Academy of Music, or BAM, exists in the largest African American population in the United States. So, I mean, again, these numbers are just relevant to me in terms of talking to you that the borough of Brooklyn has the largest population, which is 2.5 million people. And of the 2.5 million people, 500,000 are African American individuals. So we have a greater responsibility for artistic programming that is culturally diverse. That means racial diversity, ethnic diversity, and today I would even say religious diversity, because I feel a responsibility to our Islamic audiences to program artists who are part of that faith. And so that, in answering Cristina's question, is how to reflect your community on the artistic stages. And BAM now has 3 stages, but also has 4 cinemas. And it has a restaurant and bars. And on that restaurant and bar, we program music, which is free, on Friday and Saturday night. So between the main stage theaters, the BAM Cafe Theater, and the 4 cinemas, we are programming both for Brooklyn and Manhattan audiences. So that's our responsibility. And today, in terms of business practices within art and culture, there's a phrase called cultural engagement. And cultural engagement means exactly what I'm referring to, is how you create a relationship with the men and women who are interested in participating in the art and culture that you're putting on these stages. And again, I'm balancing both the performing arts and cinema arts in my discussion. So that is what is going on today. It's a very different kind of mandate. There's one audience that is readily available for the contemporary performing arts, a festival that we produce called the Next Wave Festival, and then there's a separate audience that's interested when I do a cultural event in the city of New York, like just recently, a residency of the Royal Shakespeare Company from England coming to Brooklyn to sit down in one of my theaters for 6 weeks to do 4 Shakespeare plays, 4 specifically history plays. So that audience for the Royal Shakespeare Company is different from the Next Wave Festival audiences. But if you look at the demographics, it breaks down to both Manhattan and Brooklyn audiences. That's the answer.
I find it amazing how people are coming by bus from Manhattan to travel to Brooklyn to see a performance. But talking about that, how is this this mixture of audience that you have to look at every day in your work? How is this influencing the avant-garde component that you had in the 60s? The BAM was one of the places where a lot of avant-garde artists came for the first time, and they premiered their works there. Do you have to scale down this risk component, this avant-garde component, in order to reach an audience that is not it's not interested in that, or it's not very knowledgeable about that? It's not open to that?
No, again, you have to understand that you're talking about New York City. So New York City just has a large number of people. So as I said, between Manhattan and Brooklyn, you're talking close to 5 million people. It's a very different relationship than most cities have when you talk about my institution. And that of that percentage, there is it's the character of a resident of New York City that they have a unique characteristic, which is curiosity. The curiosity makes them want to be a participant. We call they're looking for discoveries. There's an avid interest in contemporary culture in New York City. That's not true for every city in the United States, but in New York City, it's uniquely characteristic of the individuals who reside there to want to find the new, the different, the innovative, the progressive, and that's what I deliver in the Next Wave Festival. I never use the phrase. You use the phrase because it's a European phrase, avant-garde. Americans do not use that phrase. I don't do avant-garde work. I do new, innovative, progressive work in the arts.
And you're doing it great. Coming to Matei, Paris was one of the places where the avant-garde and new innovative, to give the other definition, the new innovative artists are coming, and you are among these artists in Paris, the one Romanian artist that has become an institution. Talking about institutions, you are the only playwright in Romania that was the core of a festival. You had a festival only with plays of yours staged in Romania, in Timișoara, right? How is your view on institution building, not you as an institution, but institution building? How do you work with institutions? And how do institutions help you become what you are?
I will start with another story, a very nice story, like a joke. In the town of Suceava, which is a big town in the north of the country, we have a theater since 1 year. It's like chef-lieu du département. Cum să explicăm că este capitală de județ?
It's a county, let's say capital.
The capital of the region. And I start 6 years ago to organize a festival in this town because I am born there in this region. And with companies, with shows, with debates, and I started to say to the press, this town needs a theater. I will say it every month to the press until the day you will create a theater, because one day you will be ashamed by what I'm saying and you will oblige to put money to create a theater. And I did the same thing the next year, and the third year, and the fourth year, and finally something happens. And we have now a theater with 10 actors employed, with a director, artistical director, and we start the first show, the first production will be in autumn. It's a very special way to build institution. What I want to say, in fact, is that sometimes one man, one artist, a passion, an energy can create energies. Very often it's a personality or a writer or somebody who has very good skills as a manager who can do many, many things in this country. Everything is possible. But you have to deblock the energy and to fight, of course. And it does work. I will go back to France because it happened something very interesting in France 25 years ago. When I came in Paris in 87, for example, in Paris it was an American cultural institution. As in many towns and cities from Europe and around the world, America has cultural institutions. But in 91 or 92, the American states decided to close the American cultural institution from Paris. Because, I don't know who said, the cultural visibility of America is big enough and we don't need a cultural institute in Paris. It was like a shock at that moment in Paris because, and now I will say in Romanian, francezii și-au zis, iată uite, americanii nu mai au nevoie de un institut cultural la Paris, pentru că, de fapt, cultura americană se vinde oricum foarte bine.
So the French thought that, well, the Americans don't need an institute or an institution in Europe or in Paris because American culture sells so well anyway.
Asta înseamnă că trebuie să ne închidem și noi institutele culturale din străinătate?
Does this mean that we, as French, have to close our cultural institutes abroad?
Dar, dimpotrivă, Franța este țara care are cele mai multe institute culturale în străinătate.
On the contrary, France is the country that has the most cultural institutions around the globe.
Pentru că bătălia mondială în materie de vizibilitate culturală este inegală.
Because the battle for cultural visibility and influence around the world is unequal.
America este o țară atipică.
The US is
nebună.
Yes.
Un model parțial de urmat pe planetă.
Not always a good model to follow. Or sometimes
nu tot ce vine din America este interesant.
Not everything that comes from the US is actually interesting.
Va continua să fascineze toată planeta.
It will continue to be fascinating.
Și dacă n-ar exista America, ar fi o lume foarte tristă pe pământ.
And we would have a very sad world if the US would not exist.
În același timp, dacă i-am lăsat pe copiii noștri să se uite numai la filmele făcute de Hollywood,
if we would leave our children, me as well, to only look at Hollywood movies,
ar însemna să programăm o spălare pe creier totală.
Would mean to actually program a brainwashing.
Diversitatea limbajelor este un lucru prețios în spațiul creativității culturale.
Diversity of language is incredibly important in culture.
Din cauza asta eu cred că Franța, de pildă, în continuare are un cuvânt de spus, deși în America deseori apar tot felul de articole despre cultura franceză care a murit.
And even if in the US there are sometimes articles that say that French culture has died, France has not obviously died from a cultural perspective.
România are ceva de spus, Europa de răsărit are ceva de spus.
Eastern Europe, Romania have a lot to say.
Pentru mine, cel mai important lucru care se întâmplă în Europa în acest moment este descentralizarea culturală a Europei.
So the most important thing for him is in Europe is this decentralization of culture.
Există spectacole care sunt de o mare importanță pentru cultura europeană care nu pot fi văzute în acest moment decât la Sibiu.
There are important cultural events or happenings for European
și care se întâmplă în această
that only happen in this
în acest spațiu.
city or this space.
Marea șansă a României și a altor orașe din Europa de răsărit este să creeze pelerinaje culturale în aceste locuri.
So one of the important things that should happen is to create I don't know actually.
Pilgrimage. Cultural pilgrimage.
Cultural pilgrimage, yes. Let's go.
Una dintre șansele pe care le avem, one chance that we have today is to open up the conversation and to ask everybody if you have questions for our two special guests coming from very different cultures. Eu nu văd în sală, dar...
Hi, this question is for Joe Melillo, actually. I know the term avant-garde was mentioned here, and I know the situation has changed in New York through the decades in terms of economics, gentrification. Does he personally feels that BAM has become more conservative through the decades?
Oh, not at all. I think that BAM has become more complicated, not more conservative. Complicated for all the reasons you were addressing in terms of the economy, you know, the gentrification. If you were to come to the community within which BAM sits, it's called Fort Greene. And if you were to see right now, if I could take everyone in this room and transport you to Fort Greene, you would see a tremendous amount of real estate construction going on at the moment. And that represents for us a new opportunity. So we see it as, okay, these are the new challenges for us. How do we find a way to communicate to somewhere between 10 to 14,000 new residents in the borough of Brooklyn in the specific area of Fort Greene? So it's not really about conservatism. It is about how to take on creative challenges in the face of all of the issues that are part of the 21st century.
Hi, thank you very much for all the information. It's really an interesting talk. For Mr. Visniec, you seem to be a playwright that is very close to the people. You go to events, you attend your own stagings. And my question for you is, what do you feel audiences need? So if you're thinking about the future, what would you write about next or do next as a theater person for audiences for the future? And for Mr. Melillo, I perceive a growing difference between people living in high civilization and people living by, I don't know, older technological standards, or a gap between people living in high technology and not. Do you perceive the same thing, and is it reflected in your program, in your artistic program? Thank you.
Can you rephrase the first question, like shorter? It's a very long question.
Pentru mine românește.
Mi se pare că sunteți unul dintre oamenii de teatru foarte aproape de oameni, de spectatori. Ce vedeți pentru viitor? Ce vi se pare că este nevoie pentru viitor, pentru spectatori? Ce au ei nevoie de la teatru și de la dumneavoastră?
You start.
He has to think about his answer. I think all of us are in a particular moment of time between one world and a new world that's emerging. What I'm referring to is your question, which is about there are people who are entrenched in new technologies and the advancements in society, and that is also happening in performance. So yes, those advancements actually see their way into my artistic program, but not in... I have to stop myself because just remember I have 3 theaters. I have a 2,000-seat opera house. I have an 850-seat dramatic theater, and then a 250-seat completely flexible theater. So in the 250-seat theater, you would see new ideas and technology being programmed, not in those big theaters. In time, the women or the men who replace me will be programming in those big theaters work that's technologically based. But at the moment, these are just innovations and experiments happening in the performance.
Eu cred în continuare că teatru este un loc de socializare care nu poate fi înlocuit cu nimic.
I still believe that theater is a socializing space that cannot be replaced by anything.
Într-un moment când ecranele apar în viața noastră într-o cantitate atât de mare, teatru este aproape ultimul loc de comunicare directă, de dialog direct.
Theater remains the only way of directly communicating while we are seeing screens everywhere.
Uitați-vă la această Europa, care se construiește, se divizează. Teatrul este un unificator spiritual al Europei.
Look at Europe. It builds, it rebuilds, it goes down, it goes up. Theater is a unifying force.
Cei care au fost mari unificatori ai Europei, cine sunt? Sunt Shakespeare, sunt Molière, sunt Chekhov, sunt Ionescu, sunt Beckett, sunt Ibsen.
So who are the ones that united Europe?
Europa teatrelor este una care funcționează. Europa festivalurilor este una care funcționează.
The Europe of theaters, the Europe of festivals is a Europe that works, that functions.
Emoția pe care o resimt oamenii aici la Sibiu în fața unor spectacole este aceeași cu cea pe care o resimt cei de la Avignon la festival sau cei de la Edinburgh la festival.
The emotion and the energy that people feel in Sibiu at theater is the same as in Avignon and other festivals or cities.
Pe de altă parte, eu cred în continuare că teatrul și literatura captează ceea ce nicio altă disciplină socială nu poate capta: profunzimea contradicțiilor ființei umane.
The depth, theater, and not only theater, is the only way to go deep into the one, what man is, or
what I want to say, in fact, is that for me, literature and theater is able to go inside the human being so far that no discipline can go, no philosophy or sociology, la sociologie ou la psychologie, la littérature, le théâtre, the theater can go very far to catch the contradiction of the human being. This is one reason we need always poetry, literature, theater to understand ourselves. Because it's not enough, the philosophy, the psychology, the policies cannot keep this deep I don't know, laboratory of the contradiction of the energies in the human being. And without theater, I think our life would be so poor or so boring. Theater for me and literature is a sort of way to understand, o cale de cunoaștere.
A way of acquiring knowledge.
And
self-knowledge.
What is very important for me when I write plays is, of course, I have many subjects in my plays, and sometimes subjects about the reality. For example, my last play is about migrations, about the drama happening in the Mediterranean Sea. But when I write a play, what is more important than information is the emotion. If the information goes to the public with a strong emotion, something will stay in the head. If only information goes, it will be disappeared very quickly. A strong emotion, a strong dramatical situation, it will stay inside us and will continue to work. This is for me the main objective, or I don't know, when I write a play, to be able to keep a strong emotion and dramatical situation which oblige the spectator to think all his life eventually. I'm still thinking about the plays of Shakespeare or Chekhov I saw when I was very young. This is for me the power of theater.
We have another question there.
Very briefly, in this world of inflation of artists, of big data, of short attention span of the spectator and of the buyer, how do we ensure, and of the financing people, how do we ensure artists, important artists, that are not necessarily sellers, that are not necessarily persistent, but they do have an artistic voice? How do they not get lost between the cracks of the internet and the information society? But I can rephrase it. În această lume extrem de... The same question.
But to whom?
To both. To both. În această lume extrem de rapidă, în care avem foarte multă informație, foarte mulți artiști, cum ne asigurăm că artiștii care sunt într-adevăr importanți din perspectiva artistică, dar nu sunt vânzători, nu sunt persistenți, nu atrag neapărat privirea finanțatorului, cum ne asigurăm că ei rămân valizi și viabili?
Well, again, I think you're talking about professional responsibility. The professional responsibility of those of us who are gatekeepers. In other words, I am in charge of an institution. So it becomes our responsibility very specifically to engage this gentleman to my right, who is an artist, who has a particular gift as a writer, who writes, he's committed to writing plays, is giving him the opportunity to have his art in our stages. And that's, so forget about me as being BAM, it's just, it's the responsibility of the Sibiu Festival to give artists the opportunity to do their art. It's responsibility of BAM to give artists the opportunity to do their work. It is the only way in the live performing arts, in this case theater, or in dance, or in music, that you have the opportunity putting these forms in front of audiences, and that's how art and culture will continue beyond our lifetimes.
Another story. For many years, I go every year to the Festival of Avignon, for example. I started in 90, the first for 26 years I go each year to the Festival of Avignon. When I went there for the first time, there were only 300 plays in the off section. Now there are 1,300 shows. It's huge, it's not human really, because why not finally? Of course, all these shows cannot be good. This is absolutely clear. But there is a very special way to understand very quickly which are good and which are not. After 3 days, the public are communicating, the spectators are communicating between them, and we know really which are the 100 shows worth to be seen. The public finally is an instrument of the identification of which is good and which is not good. In fact, I will say it in Romania, publicul trebuie să participe la identificarea valorii. Este rolul său. În definitiv, trebuie să-ți asumi riscul să vezi 2 spectacole proaste, pentru că al 3-lea să-ți aducă o revelație și să începi să le spui celorlalți, mergeți la ăla și nu mergeți la celălalt.
It is a public responsibility to also create value or validate as well, and to talk to others that you should go to that show and so on. And you might see 1 or 2 shows that are not that good, but the third one might give you whatever you want.
Oferta culturală este un joc care se joacă cu 2 echipe, actorii și spectatorii.
The cultural offer or the cultural game is played with the audience and the actors.
Și spectatorii, sigur că nu poți să vezi mai capodopere într-un festival sau într-o ofertă culturală oferită de o instituție, dar spectatorul penalizează scăderea calității și se produce un feedback.
So the public has the power to validate and to see or to say if a play is not that good.
Deci pentru mine spectatorul este un actor activ al vieții culturale care își asumă și eșecul, dar și reacționează în fața lui și îl penalizează.
The actor, the public, if you like, is an actor in the cultural world as well, because when it sees something that it's not to its liking, it has to react.
Aveți voie să nu vă placă, să ieșiți din sală dacă nu vă place, fără să perturbați spectacolul, și după aceea să spuneți, nu mai mergeți la prostia aceea în veci, dar mergeți la Visniec, acolo am văzut o piesă extraordinară.
So let's presume you go to a show and you get out silently, preferably, and then obviously you just go to a Visniec one because it's much better than anybody else.
We have time for just one last question, if there's anyone. Nobody? Okay. Let's thank our guests today for these ideas. Thank you.